Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Kian.
Lovely to have you on today. I don't know if you've seen the podcast before, but there's a way we like to kick it off. So, the way to kick it off is we have a question from our last guest. Now, the question for you today is what has been the most impactful change in your leadership style within the last year?
That's a good question. Within the last year, I've only been at my current post just over a year, so I would have to relate it to where I am now, the University of Surrey. I'm leading quite a large team at the moment, probably the largest I've led in my career. So I probably had to think about it, adapt how I engage with that team, particularly there's like 90, nearly 90 people. I've had to change the way I engage with that wider team, make sure I'm much more visible to all areas of the team and be more present on site as well, and making sure that um, I don't favor one team over another. I'm just trying to be more visible and aware and available to all of the team, even so far as I was given a locker at the end of the room that we have, the shared working space, and somebody asked me if I wanted to move the locker closer to me. I've asked it to be left where it is because it makes me walk the length of the office to engage with everybody.
That's amazing. Like those small details just to show you're visible and present. And do you think that's the most important thing when leading teams? Is just being seen rather than kind of I always think of like when you reach a certain level that you get your own office, you're away from everyone. That's the kind of like pinnacle of like becoming a director. But would you say that's important to be like sat with the team, be seen?
Well, it's interesting at Surrey, we don't have individual offices. We actually sit in amongst the staff. So we have an open plan office, a lovely, airy, bright open plan office alongside HR and finance, and I sit myself in the middle of it.
Nice. Oh, so you're with the whole of professional services. You're literally it's like
Yeah, the professional services are we're on one side, HR and finance are on the other, admissions and marketing and so on are above us.
amazing. And I definitely want to touch more on Surrey, but I think it's important that we walk through the early part of your career and how you got to where you got to today. It'd be great if you could kind of share your story on how you got into kind of IT and all things digital transformation.
I think I fell into IT at the beginning of my career. I did a good degree in theology, which is hardly the right topic to lead for a career in IT. I was really interested in IT during my university days. I needed a job. I was trying to raise funding for a master's at the time, and I managed to blag a job in a retail computer sales center, really selling Amstrad and PCW and Amiga and all those sort of machines to members of the public. And I just picked up a lot on that job around the different types of cables, the different way of connecting things, daisy wheel printers, laser printers, dot matrix printers. And I just really enjoyed it. And that's how I got into that. I then got made redundant. Unfortunately, it was 1990. There was a recession and a lot of people have forgotten about that. And I was talking to a friend who was working at the University of Exeter as a graduate trainee, and they asked if I'd be interested in becoming one of those because they were short. They normally had 5 graduate trainees every year. And I said, why not? So I applied, I got accepted, I moved down to Devon from Dorset, where I lived, and I started as a graduate trainee in the library of all places. So my first part of my career was very much library based. And over that time, I moved from being a graduate trainee to being a library assistant. And then it was the beginning of the web, it was the beginning of PCs, and they realized that they needed to create a role for someone to manage that estate. And I got that job, and that started my formal IT career. And I did that role through various grades for about 12 years in the library. I saw everything from our first PC to having a large 150 plus cluster of PCs. I did networking CD-ROMs. I remember the first ever web browser. We had dumb terminals. I did the full history of and development of IT in that role over 12 years. And then I was centralized. The university went through consolidation of professional services. This was at Exeter. where marketing, finance, HR, IT were all centralized into central teams. And I was moved then from the library into a central team, initially as a sort of library specialist, but then also started doing projects. I remember doing project managing our first outsourcing of a solution to a commercial data center in Amsterdam, for instance. Then I became head of academic systems and then gradually progressed through my career through different roles up to assistant IT director at Exeter. And then during COVID 2021, I decided to do something different. I was offered the opportunity of voluntary severance. I decided to take that and see what else I could do, and actually found myself on the commercial side for a couple of years, which was an interesting experience after nearly 30 years or 30 years in a university to be on the other side of the fence. I worked for a Microsoft partner, a global Microsoft partner who particularly specialized in SharePoint and information management. And I was pre-sales or a strategic consultant back into education, not just universities, but schools, colleges, multi-academy trusts across UK and Europe. And that was a very interesting time. But I became frustrated that I could see some things I could do back in higher education. I learned a lot while being out of it and wanted to really go back in feeling that it was almost like an unfinished business. So after a couple of years, I managed to get a colleague in a recruitment company said, "Why don't you consider contracting?" So I became a contractor and ended up at University of Portsmouth for a year, helping John Ward, who was the CIO there, to rebuild his PMO because he'd gone through a restructuring and the PMO needed rebuilding. And I did that, and I was back into HE, and I enjoyed that. And then John moved to Surrey, and he asked if I could join him to help him out for a bit when he went to Surrey. And then I secured a permanent post there this summer. So that's a quick snapshot of my 35 years career in IT.
Amazing. And two questions then for you. Like you mentioned that first step into management, and obviously you moved. Like, how was that transition into leadership very early on? Because you went from looking after yourself to now having to worry about a team of people.
Yes, I think I was lucky in that I had a bit of a progression in that when I was working in the library, I did end up with a team of one. So that was my first exposure to management of another member of staff. But moving up to being head of academic systems, where I had a team of 8 or 9, was definitely a step change. And I remember at the time talking with another university senior leader, talking to him about how he made the change. I think my biggest concern at the time was I would be losing my technical skills in moving to management, and was I going to be a valuable commodity if I was able to retain or those skills? And the university supported me in that change. We went through some management programs to train to be a leader and a manager. And I think I adapted to realizing that I could also add value as a manager as well as a technical lead. So it's really accepting that management is not it's not the end of your IT career. You have so much more that you can do and you can deliver.
And my second part of kind of your journey, you mentioned that you became a contractor, but still, yet again, you were in a management position. Do you have to like change your style or your approach when you know you're not going to be there for longer term?
I think you do, and I think it was a lesson that I learnt during that time because after being in one place for 30 years, one of the things I learned when I was in commercial was I had to learn to engage with different people and different clients and different partners and just adapt really quickly to those different environments, something that I probably wasn't as used to when I was at Exeter. And so that set me up, I think, quite nicely to be acting as a contractor because that's exactly what you do. You're going into a new place, a new environment, and you've got to adapt quickly, find your feet, and engage with people and then make an impression. So I think my time out in commercial probably helped me into that contracting role a bit more because of that.
And like in your view, what does it take to become a great leader from your experience? Obviously, you've got a breadth of experience across different institutions, not different industries, sorry, almost like different types of companies. Like you said, in the commercial world, you've worked as a contractor, you've worked in HE for a long time, different institutions. Like, what does it take to become a great leader, in your opinion?
Well, I've always aspired and referred to my leadership style as a servant leadership, and I think that for me has all the different facets of a great leader. You're very much a leader, but from within rather than necessarily from the front. That's not to say I can't lead from the front. I can when I need to, but I'd rather be within the team, leading, guiding, coaching. I think leading is a range of different skills and working within the team and collectively take everybody forwards, not necessarily always leading from the front or pushing from behind. I think I just want to be quite quite a coaching, guiding leader that brings a team along with you.
Yeah, it's almost being that enabler and make
Yes, yeah,
what is the problem statement? Let me see how I can help you.
yeah, absolutely. And then but also guide by example if they're not able to see how they need to do it, or you can illustrate from your experience how you've done it in the past and how you might want to do it again. Or you can also be open and honest about your own failures and say, I did this, but it didn't work. Try this way. So I think it's about honesty as well.
So it's almost being a vulnerable leader as well, not just trying to put a strong face on, but showcase that you can make those mistakes.
No, absolutely. I mean, we all make mistakes, and I don't think we should shy away from those. I think we should learn from them and sometimes be open and honest with our teams that, yeah, I've made a mistake. I mean, yesterday I was in a call with my team. There was a bit of confusion over something, and I realized that I could have avoided that confusion if I'd written something after the meeting clarifying X, Y, or Z about that particular thing we were discussing. I didn't send that, and I was open and honest in the meeting. I think I could have probably done this, would have meant that we would probably could have avoided some of this meeting.
And are there any leaders like in your career that shaped your thinking in that aspect then, or inspired you to become the leader you are today?
I think I've been fortunate in having quite a few different managers who have been very different styles. And I think I've learned from all of them. And I've instead of just having one leader or manager that's always been one style, I've had quite a different mix. And I think I've benefited from learning from all of them. I've been led by somebody who is very much a red on the spectrum. I don't know if you know the colors, and I'm very much a green. So we're diametrically opposite, but actually I got on very well with them. They were much more direct, but actually I probably matured more in that time with them than I'd done in previous years because they had a different way of working and I had to adapt to the way they were working. But then I've had other leaders who are more visionaries and less direct and more allowing you to then align with their vision. So I
Mm.
think I'm fortunate in that respect that I've had different experiences.
Do you have to adapt your leadership style to different people as well, in terms of your approach, how you communicate, and
Yeah, I think so. I think when you're working in a university with a range of different stakeholders as well, I think you have to adapt how you lead, how you communicate, and how you present. People like to be led in different ways. They like to learn in different ways, and they like to hear information in different ways. I think part of a good leader is to be able to see that and then tailor your approaches to meet those needs.
and you touched on earlier how there was something that wanted to draw you back to higher education, almost like unfinished
Mm.
business. Like, what was that that drew you back?
I've thought about this a lot, and I was asked this recently, and I instinctively responded. And it's really about education for me. I come from a working class background. I was brought up in a council house surrounded by army housing. I saw education for me as the way out of that and the way to better myself. And I've always retained that thinking about education, that education is an enabler and sometimes a leveler as well of and I'm really passionate about supporting education, enabling people to learn and or to do research and to allow them to do them as best as they can. So I'm really quite passionate about delivering solutions that enables people to do their jobs better, whether that be a student a professional services member of staff or a researcher who's trying to find the latest gene thing or something like that. It's it's about in really giving people the tools and the procedures and so on that really helps them achieve what they want to achieve.
And like in your experience, again, you've worked at Exeter, Portsmouth, Surrey now. Like, I imagine you've worked with some pretty cool individuals with different backgrounds. Is there any stories that, like, you touched on the reason why, but is there any stories that you have to mind that, you think, oh, do you know what, that made me feel good, or that's the reason I do it?
Yeah, I mean, I've there's been a couple of times I remember rolling out a new research management system at Exeter. It was a team of one. It was basically me, both project managing and doing the setup, and I was working with somebody in research services. And actually, we just did a lot of communication, a lot of engagement, a lot of going out into the colleges or faculties, as we would call them, really engaging with people. And I really enjoyed doing that and getting this solution delivered, not just technically, but also procedurally, and allowing, making sure that people used it and adopted it. And I got some feedback after that project that it was one of the smoothest rollouts of an enterprise system that they'd ever seen. So I was quite pleased with that. But I think the key to success was I worked closely with another person in research services, and we did a lot of legwork out into the faculties. And I think when you get feedback like that, yeah, you think it's absolutely this is worth it, and you want to take that forwards and build on that.
Nice. It's so good to hear that you've got a story as well from that far back that still sticks with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that made an impression on me, and there's another story I have from my early in my career. I wasn't just a technical person. I was a resident in a university hall, so I was a resident tutor. And I remember seeing a student who punched a hole through the door. Nothing untoward. It was quite common with students, but in this particular case, just spending a bit of time with him revealed that he'd had a reason for punching the door that had really upset him, and he needed that support and guidance. And it was less about the door, more about him as an individual. And it was really, again, taking forward the support for him. And I remember when he graduated, he came back actually to thank me where I worked, to seek me out to say thank you for my intervention those years previous, and to and just to wish me well, which was and that's quite moving too.
That is
Someone
really
that
cool.
remembers an intervention you did.
Yeah, and they probably do today as well. So if they're listening, you know. Um, Ian, one thing I've noticed as well, speaking to people like yourself, is biggest um, the biggest lessons have always come from challenges. So, out of interest, like, what's been the toughest challenge you face in your career, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I think it was when I was moved from the library to central IT. It was not an easy time. I mean, a lot of people were unhappy about being moved and consolidated into the central department. You feel like you've gone from a place where you're known, where you have that leadership, you have your team, and you're in control, and then you're moved into a new team in a central department with a much bigger remit. And I did struggle with that initially. I think I lost that feeling of control. I lost the feeling of being able to affect change in the way that I'd been able to previously. And I did struggle with that. It was interesting about 9 months after that move, the head of my team that I was put in decided she didn't want to do the role anymore and she was going to actually emigrate. And so a vacancy appeared at the top of the team, and I put myself forward for the role, approached the director and said, I would like to do that role. I think I have the skills to do it. And I remember discussing it with some team member, and the role was on no higher money or grade than what I was already on. And they said, why do you want to do that if you're already on that grade and money? And I said, it's because I want to be able to affect change. I want to be able to deliver change. And I can't do that for my current role. I feel that leading this team, we can do so much more. And I would feel satisfied and feel like I was achieving more in that role and delivering change. But yeah, that transition for the 9, 10 months was quite a difficult one because I felt a bit divorced and lost from that previous experience.
And being a change maker yourself, like you felt uncomfortable then. Like I imagine there's still a lot of change you do now. Like, is it do you just get used to it? Like, what is it? Because as humans, I'd say we tend to dislike change too much. We get like to get set in our ways. Like, have you evolved in that in terms of liking the change more, or like,
Yeah, I've always said that I like change. I get bored by um, things being all the same all the time. I get bored by routine, so I very much like change. And I guess that's one of the reasons, again, why I like working in IT in universities, because if you think about the IT we have now with AI and Copilot, that's very different from even 5 years ago and the solutions we had then. So if you work in IT in universities, there's plenty of change all the time. And year on year. It's just something new to learn, and I'm passionate about that and being able to learn and adapt and change with it.
amazing? And another challenge is large digital transformations within university. They're notoriously complex. What do you think is the underestimated challenge in delivering them?
I think they often underestimate the capacity of the business for the transformation, and I don't think there is enough time given to allowing the business to adapt and go with the transformation. We can deliver technical solutions quickly in inverted commas, but adoption is a whole different kettle of fish. You have got to work hard on adoption. You've got to take the business on the journey with you, and they will adopt and change perhaps slower than you would like, but you have to go with that.
Mm. And like in your role now, you've worked projects, you're doing operations, you're pretty much covering most of IT from my understanding at Surrey at the moment in terms of leading. But like, how do you balance innovation with keeping the day-to-day operation stable when resources are light? And I know that's a very big challenge at the moment.
It is because you get lots of pressures from the business to deliver X, Y, or Z in order to improve the student experience or make something more efficient. But at the same time, you've got to really focus on the foundations. And sometimes you can't really deliver on the really exciting stuff until you've done the foundations. And I think so part of the tension that we need to manage is that the business wants to run a bit faster in this space, but in reality, we're not geared in terms of data or integrations or solutions to deliver that vision. So we have to, again, work with the business, get them to understand the work that we need to do, and go on that journey together and try and get to that place as quickly as we can. But delivering a combination of BAU and foundation and then realizing the value. It's not easy, especially at the moment with the financial challenges the sector has. We are we're being pressed to deliver change, but at the same time we do need to get a lot of the foundations absolutely right first.
And do you think that's changing? Do you think that the sector's realizing that that's important? Because I've always found in my experience as well is that like infrastructure and operations is normally like the unsung hero that no one really cares about unless it stops working. It's almost like insurance is the best analogy for it. But do you think that that shift is changing?
I think it's having to because of AI. Actually, I think AI and some of the regulatory returns, like the HESA report that we have to do, has really shown the attention on data in a way that universities probably haven't looked at their data before. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, IT can be an unforgiving landscape sometimes when you just assume that it'll work and you don't get thanks for it. And it reminds me of an analogy that one of the founders of Hewlett Packard used. He referred to IT as being like, or the perfect IT being like the knife and fork that you would have when you're eating a meal. I mean, when was the last time you really thought about the sharpness of your knife or the effectiveness of your fork or the balance of your spoon? You don't. You just use those utensils to deliver the culinary experience that you're looking forward to. Um, and IT is very good. IT is very much like that. You shouldn't really see or feel the IT. You should be able to just do what you want to do without any friction from the IT that's delivering it.
So, looking back, Ian, was there a moment or decision that had a major impact on how you lead or think about technology?
That's a good question. Um, I'm not too sure there was one occasion. I think there's been some realizations on that journey, if that makes any sense. Um, I think I learned a lot actually being out in commercial for a couple of years and looking back in on the sector and looking at what other universities were doing, but also looking at the solutions we were offering as a company, but also being much more aware of the channel structure for business and how Microsoft works. And I think that was a really interesting education for me, and it made me think about how to deliver IT and more about how we should leverage partners and we should leverage that ecosystem to better deliver than perhaps we had been doing in the past. I think my understanding of that commercial piece, I'm trying now to take into the work I'm doing and trying to use some of the lessons learned from that now. I know it's fairly recent, but actually I think that was quite an epiphany in terms of how to work with suppliers. I don't think the sector's necessarily been the best at working with suppliers and making them become partners or necessarily managing vendors very well. And I think it's something that was really important for me during that time.
And out of interest, you talk about suppliers being partners. I think everyone likes to say they're a partner, but in your opinion, what actually truly defines a supplier that is a partner?
I think for me, a supplier becomes a partner when they are more interested in being properly alongside you on a journey, that they're there for the longer term. They're not there necessarily just for the quick win and then they disappear after they've sold you the product. And I think you develop that ongoing relationship with them, and then they know what you're about. They don't have to second guess you necessarily. They know where you're going. They know how they can work with you, but they're not always selling. There's a value add to that relationship. So they might give you some advice or just help you on achieving something that without necessarily having to sell you something.
So it's the giving back rather than just the taking. It's almost the
Yeah, yeah,
true value of,
absolutely.
it goes
Yeah,
both ways and it's reciprocated rather than just what can I get from you? And
yeah, because we should remember as well that suppliers are always learning from us. We are their market, and they will learn a lot from every engagement they have with us, and they'll record that in their CRMs, and they will use that to develop their own thinking and develop their own products. So it's important when we engage with suppliers that we actually not just represent our own team or our university, but the sector too, because actually we want to be able to convince suppliers where they, show them where we need to take them, where they need to go, and what opportunities there are in the sector for them, because they may not necessarily be aware.
something that you do quite heavily, and I know you're heavily involved with at the University of Surrey, is around IT sustainability. Obviously, you touched on partners, but like, where did your focus on IT sustainability and reducing digital carbon footprint begin?
I think it goes back many years for when I was studying. Actually, I briefly did a part-time, well, not briefly, I did it for 6 years. I did a part-time PhD, which I never finished, sadly. But during that time, I was looking at um, the world population problem and how things like ecology and sustainability feature in that, and how we can the world can sustain a larger population by equitable distribution of resources and so on. And I think that really ignited my interest in green and sustainability, and it's been sort of one thing I've been following ever since in my career. And in terms of IT, I think we have some very serious challenges in that space. Um, Everything from recycling or repurposing equipment to cooling data centers to the AI chips that we now want to generate huge amounts of heat and consume huge amounts of electricity.
And what are some of the practical ways universities can reduce the environmental impacts on IT?
I think one of them is around IT asset management. I think it's about tracking your assets properly recycling them when they're at the end of their life, but also repurposing them if they're not at the end of their life, properly tracking the assets and then having that full sort of life cycle of each individual unit properly understood and utilized so that we deliver full value from every laptop or PC we buy, making sure that we can repurpose stuff where it may be not appropriate for one job, but it would work for another. Maybe even pass some equipment, if we can, to charities to reuse and repurpose. But ultimately, then, if we can't do any of that, we actually properly work with companies to then properly recycle the equipment.
Do you have any examples at the moment, like where Surrey have done that? Like maybe where universities could think differently.
I think we're very good at Surrey in terms of working with recyclers to get all the equipment recycled. I often see crates in our storeroom downstairs with equipment ready to be recycled, and a couple of times a year there's a big exercise where somebody turns up and we roll out all the roll pallets and the team pass all those roll pallets to the company to take away to be recycled. I think there's some interesting opportunities going forwards with data centers, though, and it's something we're only just beginning to look at as we refurbish our own.
And like out of interest, how do you encourage your teams to be sustainable by design on delivering new systems and services?
I think we need to be very aware of the costs we're incurring with different solutions and services. And actually, and interestingly now with the challenge of budgets in universities anyway, I think that's become more second nature than it used to be in the sector. And there is a very much a cost to things like storage. And so we're very much looking at our storage at the moment. We, like many universities, have to get our storage to a certain level by a certain date. But that storage is generating carbon emissions by virtue of us using this space on Microsoft's storage platform. So not only are we trying to reduce our storage to reduce cost and also to comply with retention and also to be ready for AI, we are trying to reduce our storage also to reduce our footprint on the Microsoft servers. And we benchmark that. And when we've completed our reduction in storage, we will revisit that benchmark and see how we've impacted that.
Nice. And would you say like it's a leadership responsibility rather than just a technical? You touched on it earlier that sometimes people think it's an IT services issue, but do you think it's a wider organisation issue?
Absolutely. And sorry, we're very passionate about sustainability. I work very closely with a sustainability lead. We just produced the first draft of our sustainability plan, and we're just agreeing on metrics for that. But that example of using the Microsoft benchmarks to look at our current impact on carbon emissions, then driving down that storage and then revisiting. He's been very keen about that, very keen to help us with that and to track it and report it. But also, he's supporting us and IT and the marketing department to do communications at the university around this too. And it's so a part of our story around reducing our storage, there is a sustainability element.
Makes sense. And like when it comes to transformations and building and empowering teams, obviously we've talked a lot on leadership, but like what's been the hardest part of building or managing transformation teams?
One of the things I've always been wary of doing is building teams in my own image. And I think if you're going through a transformation and you're building a team for that, I think you have to be very aware that you don't necessarily recruit in your own image and you try and recognize that you need a range of different skills in the team to deliver effective change. I know it's one of the things I've always been very careful about when building teams. And um, yeah, so you don't want loads of Ians, definitely not. You need other people with different skills, and that's really important. And when I built a team at Exeter around architecture, I specifically went out to recruit people from different sectors so they could bring their different type of knowledge and experience into the team to help the university move forwards with various different components of the IT. So I recruited from MOD, I recruited from the energy sector, and even recruited an infrastructure architect from a Formula One team, all bringing different skills to the table. So we had this wide range of experience that we could then use to drive IT change.
Like, was it difficult though, like managing the difference in terms of backgrounds as well? Because I imagine everyone has their own ideas, and especially sectors have their own challenges and ways of working, and HE. A lot of people have been in HE for a long time, but then sometimes, like you said, you actively went out and wanted to innovate in a different way.
I think some people adapt to HE quicker than others. I think there is a risk when you come from the commercial sector that you might get frustrated with the pace of change because commercial is definitely much quicker than higher education. And I certainly, when I was working with this team that I recruited largely from outside of the sector, that was one of the things I was very keen to work with them on and get them to appreciate the almost glacial speed of university compared to, say, a Formula One team that's working instantly and on 2 week cycles. Yeah, that's a challenge, and you do find some people who can't make that change. But it's an interesting mix of experiences.
And out of interest, like I don't think this is just a HE specific question, but like how do you keep morale up when teams are under pressure or resources are stretched? Like, we're seeing across not just HE, but IT generally, there's been a lot of redundancies, people are
Mm.
leaving and teams have reduced massively in headcount. The same we're hearing is do more with less, sorry. So like how do you keep that morale high in kind of these challenging times?
I think you need to be very aware as a leader that they're under pressure and actually be open with them that you know that that's the case. I think you're going to need to recognize that because they're under pressure, they may make the odd mistake. And I think you shouldn't punish that mistake. You just need to work with them. And if something goes wrong or something goes down, support them to get that back, find out what happened, find out what we can do to stop that happening again, and provide the support to the staff to make sure that they get, that they resolve the problem and we try and avoid a repeat. I think it's about support, it's about awareness. Sometimes it's about saying the right thing at the right time, but it may seem insignificant at the time, but that's all you need to do. Sometimes it's looking at ways of doing different ways of doing things, and it may be that we shouldn't necessarily do it that way. I think the university sector in the past has been gold plating a lot of stuff, and I think realistically we're not in that position anymore, and we need to start thinking about how we deliver just as good a service at bronze level.
Fine. And you mentioned it again earlier around different backgrounds, different experiences. You've mentored through Elevate Women in Tech. Like, how has that experience influenced your own leadership style?
Yeah, so it's been a really interesting experience, and when you're a mentor, you may think of it as you just passing on to your mentee all the time, but actually, I've learned a huge amount from my mentees. I'm currently about to enter the fifth cohort, and in fact, I've got a meeting with my mentee after this. Um, it's really an interesting experience to get a feel for how women, particularly in middle of their career, so middle managers and so on, are experiencing IT and the sectors they're working in. Some of them have been in HE, some of them have been in other sectors like commercial. It, I've learned to get an appreciation of some of the challenges that they faced and try then to take that into my own workplace and either avoid those or prevent those challenges from happening. I think it's important that we support women, particularly in IT, because they have a difficult time and it's difficult sometimes for them to feel that they're able to step up to the next level. And I think there's also an assumption that every male leader is that confident leader that can step up to the plate. Um, you'd often hear about imposter syndrome, and you hear that a lot. But that's not to say that your CIO or me or one other of my leaders might also have imposter syndrome. It's how we've learned to handle it, or how we've learned to make sure that it doesn't affect how we deliver. I think it's been a great honor to be a mentee on the program, and I really do look forward to engaging engaging in the program and learning from the people that I talk to and talk with. Um, there's been some fascinating insights into different sectors as well, which has allowed me to grow and to learn and to adapt and maybe bring some of those back into higher education.
And you mentioned you've learnt a lot. Like, what advice would you give to other leaders of trying to build a more inclusive and forward-thinking digital culture?
The a more inclusive one is to be open to the art of the possible and to be open to the potential. Only yesterday, actually, I was interview panel for a role, and it was quite clear that the person in front of us may not have had all the skills we needed, but I think we recognized there was potential in that person. And I think sometimes it's right to take a punt and to actually go with that and provide them with the support to then allow them to grow into the role that you want them to be. And I think we should do that with making a team inclusive. We shouldn't always assume that we want the absolute perfect in every role. I think we should recruit for potential as well as the skills that they have. And if you do that, you find that you end up getting quite a different type of team, a team that also then develops its own sort of internal coaching mechanism where someone who's more experienced will coach the other person into developing their own skills.
So it's more about attitude than anything.
Yeah, attitude and personality and a willingness to learn and to work with others and collaborate.
And with everything you know about the sector, like, what do you think will be the next big challenge for digital leaders in universities?
I think the speed of AI is going to be the challenge. I think AI is progressing at such a great speed and its functionality and capability at such a great speed that it's challenging universities to also be a bit faster around they react to things. And I think that's going to be a challenge that stays with the sector for a while, for a few years. I think we're going to see rapid advances in AI, and AI will start appearing in a lot of different areas. You'll get suppliers who then bolt on an AI module or chatbot to their product and say it's AI enabled. Um, I think we need to be very aware that sometimes that isn't proper AI implementation, but I think we have got to adapt very quickly as a sector to how we handle this AI and the sort of big head of steam that it's generating in the next few years.
And do you think it will change the way the university operates wholly?
I think it has to in time. I think there may be a need for universities to be quicker to make decisions about things.
Mm.
I think there's an opportunity with AI to start producing more efficiencies. I don't think it's going to get rid of jobs necessarily. I think that's a bit of a um, misnomer about AI. I think it's more about removing some of the mundane, removing some of the repetitive, and allowing them people to create more value.
How are you managing that at the moment? Because I imagine that there's a lot of like worry around AI technology generally. Like every time I open up LinkedIn, it's like, oh my god, AI is going to take your job, and it's the end of the world almost, like it's the apocalypse. But like, how do you manage that? Because I imagine there's a lot of nervousness around the organisation as well, especially coming from the IT perspective, and how you manage that and those stakeholders.
I mean, there is, and I think there's a combination of nervousness, but also lack of awareness too about the art of the possible and how it works. I think, sure, there are cybersecurity considerations, there are data protection considerations. We've just gone with a platform from CloudForce called Nebula One, which I think you've interviewed Danny, who's very much in that company. And that's a very interesting solution in that it provides us with the ability to have LLMs installed within our tenant, and they stay within the tenant and operate entirely within our tenant, which provides a level of surety around our information. There's things that we can do like that, but there's a lot more to do around education of users as well, teaching people what they can do with even just the free versions of Copilot chat that they get with a standard Office install, and also be aware of the pitfalls and challenges of some of the public AI agents like ChatGPT. And we've developed some guidance internally, and we're trying to come up with. We have an acronym, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but we have an acronym that people are really encouraged to remember, to really help them think about what they're doing with data when they come to use an AI agent and whether they should load that data or not. Yeah.
It's really interesting because many years ago it was like, don't lose your USB. And that was the whole thing, like leaving your device on the train, for example. Whereas now it's like people are easily just uploading their documents or putting everything in, and sometimes don't even realize to turn the toggle off that says "Don't train the model." So, like you said, it's kind of managing the understanding and awareness, like you said, because a lot of people are just giving almost the information away for free without realizing what they're doing with it and where it's going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really important thing, and I think the adoption piece shouldn't be underestimated with AI. I think it's not just you run an adoption series of events and then you're done. I think you need to continually do that. I think there needs to be an investment continually in adoption and training because AI will change so fast. You just need to look at the Microsoft stack around what Copilot and how quickly that's changed in the last 12 months to realize that I think we're now committed to ongoing engagement and training around AI.
With transformations, then, would you say like a successful one is actually of the adoption of the transformation or whatever it may be, if it's a new system, if it's a new process, rather than you always hear like the big buzzwords, we went live on time in budget, like they're always the main ones, but instead it actually is how well adopted was that system or that process or new way of working rather than how quick do we do it and did we do it within our budget.
Yeah, absolutely. There's little point in investing, I don't know, £500,000 on a new solution if only then 10 people use it.
Yeah.
You want to leverage the value of that investment and you want to make sure that people know how to use it day in, day out, and don't just start doing things in Excel because they don't want to use
Mm.
the solution you provided them. So I think the user adoption piece is just as important as the investment in the technical or investment in the licenses. And if you're not prepared to do that adoption, you won't have a successful digital transformation. So it must be business led. It mustn't be technology led. We're trying here to improve a business. We're trying to improve the student experience or encourage researchers to be able to submit bids quicker. So we need to make sure that we're very clear about the business outcomes and make sure we deliver that.
What would be your advice, sorry, on how to drive adoption?
I think you IT should work with partners like organizational development leads in HR, which we're doing at Surrey. We have a very good relationship with that team and working very closely with them to build out our training around Microsoft Copilot Chat and about building out the network of AI champions. I think work with your colleagues who have other skills like HR, like organizational change, like marketing and communications. Work with them and work as a team of different skills and different capabilities to do that. Don't think that IT can just do it by itself because it can't. I don't think necessarily IT people are necessarily the best people to do communication, for instance.
Fine. So it's making sure that everyone's involved rather than people thinking, again, because it's a new system, it's an IT problem. No, it's their problem as much as it's IT's.
But it goes to say it's the same thing for other departments. Don't assume if you're in HR system that the HR system that works for you works for the everybody else who's using it. See your system from the perspective of the users out in the other faculties or the other professional services. There's little point in you providing a HR system to you and your team if no one else can use it.
Yeah. So it's that bigger picture, which probably links back to your architecture experience as well and that understanding. If you could speak to your younger self, Ian, at the start of your career, what advice would you give him?
um, Probably believe in myself. I think when you come out of university and IT is all very new because it was then. I mean, I graduated in '89 when IT was only really just beginning, and I wasn't entirely confident that I had the skills or the competency or the capability to pick this up. But I think through um, helping out with the very first ever sort of PC lab in our college, working with some of my my peers who understood this stuff, I learned and then became more confident as my career has progressed.
Good to hear. And finally, what question should I ask the next guest?
What is your biggest success and what did you learn from it?
Thank you, Ian. It's been great to have you on,
Thank you.
and look forward to catching up next time.
Thank you.